Hey, what's up guys? My name is Andy and you're watching Andy's Fire Club. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of FIRE, FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. I already made a previous video on why this is something that you might want to achieve in your life. So today we're going to be talking about one of the first topics that you need to achieve FIRE. And this topic is called paying yourself first. Now, you guys really need to understand this if you want to achieve FIRE, because this is very important. So before I explain what exactly is paying yourself first, let me just bring you through what exactly is paying yourself last, because this is something that 90% of people do. So imagine this scenario. What do you do first when you get your paycheck? You probably pay your rent, you pay your utilities, you pay your car payments, you pay back any loans that you need to pay, right? So then you pay all these things that you need, and then maybe you take the rest of the money and you go out to eat a couple times, right? Or you go watch a movie with your friends. And then whatever's left over, you invest it. And the problem is you never have anything left over, right? There is nothing left over. So most people never end up investing anything because at the end of the day, they don't have anything left, right? So this is what is called paying yourself last. Paying yourself last is basically you pay everybody that you owe money to, which is your landlord, the car company, the insurance company. You pay everyone that you need to pay, and then you pay yourself with the money that you have left over. This is what 90% of people do, and this is really not a good way to handle your finances. So the solution to all of this is you set aside a certain portion of your paycheck at the end of the month, and then you use that money to invest before you pay off any of the other payments. So before you pay your rent, before you pay your car insurance, before you pay anything else, you set aside part of your money and then you use that money to invest. But wait, hold on. I know people are going to say,
"But Andy, you're telling me that I shouldn't pay my rent? Are you telling me that I shouldn't pay for my car insurance? Are you telling me that I shouldn't pay all my bills?"
Well, no, of course. No, I mean, of course, pay your bills. Please pay your bills. My point is that you got to get into the mindset of you're the first bill that you need to pay. So before your landlord, before your car insurance company, before everything else, you need to pay yourself, because yourself is a bill. So the idea is that you set aside a certain amount of money and then you use that money to invest in yourself, because your future self should probably rank among the highest in terms of your priorities. Typical list of priorities might include having a car, having a roof over your head, right? But your future well-being is also a very important part. When your paycheck comes, you take a portion of it, you put it away, and then you never even look at it, and then you spend the rest. If you kind of just want to reverse the order of that psychologically in your head, that will get you a long way to achieving actually paying yourself first instead of paying yourself last. Now, the next point I wanted to talk about was pretend that you're Mormon. Now, I'm going to explain this one. So I read this article, and it's about this girl who is an ex-Mormon, right? So before she left the Mormon church, when she was a Mormon, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but in the Mormon tradition, there's something called tithing, right? So tithing is when you take 10% of your income and you donate it to the church. So what happened with this girl is that throughout her entire life, she donated 10% of whatever money that she had to the church at the end of every month. And then when she left the church, she already had the habit of taking 10% of her money and putting it somewhere else, right? So she took 10%, instead of giving it to the church, she just put it into investments for herself. So she was already kind of used to the flow of taking aside a certain amount of money and investing it. So that's all you guys need to do, right? Just pretend that there is some authority that's demanding 10% of your income, except that authority will be you in this case, right? So you're demanding 10% of your income from yourself, and you're taking that money and you're investing it. Coffee break. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was you want to make investing a non-negotiable expense. Now, what do I mean by non-negotiable? Well, if you think about rent, right? So if you, let's say you rent and your rent is $1,000 per month. Say you're a little short this month and you go to your landlord and you go, "Oh, can I just pay you $800 this month as opposed to $1,000? And then your landlord will probably look at you really weird and be like, "No," right? So your landlord would be unlikely to accept that deal because you signed the papers, you agreed to pay them, say $1,000 per month, and it's not a negotiable expense, right? So you can't really negotiate with your landlord on lowering your rent all of a sudden if you don't have enough money. That's an example of a non-negotiable expense. A negotiable expense would be your budget to go out to eat, right? So say if you're a little short on money, maybe instead of out to eat twice a week, you only go out to eat once a week, or you cut that out completely. So that's a negotiable expense. The point I'm trying to get at here is that you want to make investing a non-negotiable expense, right? So let's say you're committed to setting aside $500 every month to invest. Let's say you're a little short this month and you're only able to invest $400. Well, you should be as harsh on yourself as a landlord would be if you're missing $100. And so for most people, if they're $100 short of their investing goal, they'll just say, whatever, I'll do it. I'll make up for it next month. So they negotiate with themselves and say it's okay not to put on the maximum amount of money possible. That's not really what you want to do. So by making investing a non-negotiable expense, you're treating it with the same priority as rent, right? So you're saying to yourself, oh, I can't be late on investing. The same way that you say I can't be late on rent. And the next thing I want to talk about is what I like to call Andy's spending law. I mean, I'm sure I didn't invent this, probably someone else invented this already and I just stole it, but bear with me here. So you know that law that says that work will expand to fill time? So imagine that you're at work, right? And then your boss asks you to write this report, and then you say, it's going to take me 5 hours to write this report, when in reality, it's only going to take you 2 hours. But you say 5 hours because you want to give yourself 2 hours to write the report and then 3 hours to just chill around and browse Reddit or go on YouTube and watch this YouTube video. So if we go back to the report example, you'll see that it actually takes 5 hours for you to do, because your workflow will expand to meet that time that you gave yourself, which is 5 hours. When in fact, if you only gave yourself 2 hours, you could have done it. So the same principle applies when you're dealing with spending. So say if you set aside a certain amount of money that you're going to spend that month and you don't actually spend it all, right? So let's say you set aside $2,000 that you're going to spend in the course of that month and you only spent $1,500 by the end of the month. Well, then you have an extra $500 left over, and most people are going to think, oh, I'm just going to take this and spend it somewhere else, right? Instead of investing it or saving it or putting it away. And nobody knows what happens to that $500, right? You have $500 left over in your account and it just drains away and you don't know where it goes, right? That's what I like to call the phantom drain. So that's something that you're gonna really have to watch out for. And this is what I mean by spending will increase to meet your budget. And so say if you only make $2,000 a month, right? Next month you make $3,000. But you find that your quality of life hasn't really increased that much because your spending just goes up and it matches that higher amount, and then you never get to actually save any money. So lastly, I wanted to talk about this graph. I know it looks kind of complicated. I promise it's not. I'll explain it. On the x-axis, you have time, right? So pretend that this is the first of the month. So pretend that this is January 1st and pretend that the end of the timeline is January 31st. Right? And then you have your timeline, and then on the y-axis you have your income, right? So you get your paycheck, and then the higher line represents the maximum amount of money you're gonna make that month. So let's say if you only make $3,000 a month, then that's your total income, right? So that's that top line right there. So this bottom line is the minimum amount of spending that you need to sustain yourself. So everyone has a minimum amount, right? So you need to eat, you need a roof over your head. Some people need a car to work, or else they wouldn't be able to get to their workplace. You need to spend money on transportation. You need to spend money on a lot of things, right? So there's a minimum amount of money that you need to spend just to sustain yourself. But most people have sort of a gap between what they need to spend and what they actually make in a month. And that's where you need to invest that money if you want to achieve FIRE. So what you want to do is become this green line. So what you would notice is that as time goes on, your spending increases and increases, and it slowly increases and matches the minimum amount of money that you need to spend. And then this blue line represents the gap between what you need to spend and what you make, so that you can invest the rest if you actually spend what you need to spend and no more. Well, I mean, maybe you can go a little bit higher than that. I'm not saying that you can't have any luxuries, right? I'm not saying that you can't go out to eat at all. I'm not saying that you need to absolutely deprive yourself and save every single penny that you possibly could. But it's just something to keep in mind that the larger this gap is, the more money that you can invest and the more money that you'll have in the future. So this green line is the ideal situation. But unfortunately, most people, they're not doing what this green line does. They're doing one of these 3 red lines. So let's go through the first red line, right? So notice how this person, who is the first red line, who goes straight up, they just don't care, right? So they would spend all the money that they need. And let's say this is like January 1st, right? And let's say this is like January 5th, right? So by January 5th, they've already gone above the total amount of money that they make in the month, right? So if you're wondering how it goes above that line, well, that means that they're borrowing money to spend, right? So that means that they don't actually make enough money to sustain their lifestyle, and they need to take on more debt to finance their lifestyle. And this is very dangerous. So this is something that you never want to do, right? So don't do this, guys, right? So the spending is only going to increase even more from there, right? So could you imagine how much that person has spent by the end of January 30th if they are, at January 5th and they're already above that top line? So the second line is a little bit better, but not so much, right? So it's still sort of a straight line increase, except that, they take more time with it, right? But if you notice, at the end of the day, before the month end, they still go above that top line. So which means that they're still taking on some debt to finance their lifestyle, and they're not really investing any money. So never mind that they're not investing their money, they're also spending a lot more than they could afford. And finally, we have this red line. So you'll notice at first, this person seems to be doing pretty well. They spend, and then their spending is initially actually lower than the green line, which is great, right? But then by the time they get to, let's say, like January 25th or January 27th, and then they're getting to the end of the month, and they notice that, oh, I have all this money left over, what should I do with it? And instead of investing it, they just spend it all on one big luxury item or to something that's not generating them any income. So my point is, you don't want to be any of these red lines. So my point is, you really got to maximize the gap between what you actually make in a month and what you actually need to spend. And the point is that you got to invest the difference, right? So you got to invest the gap. That's the most important part. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you like this video. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I try to post some cool stuff in there, so I'll leave those down in the description down below. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.